it's a voice of our Indigenous youth within our community saying these are the issues.
Tonight, a suicide report says the needs of youth are not being properly funded.
We are requesting a document to the institutions.
How the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls intends to access police records.
There are so many families across this country who have to have their stories told.
And perspective on the National Inquiry from a longtime advocate. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Juanita Tautungi. Saskatchewan's Children's Advocate says there must be more support for kids in communities. In a one-year period, one northern Saskatchewan community saw 6 First Nations girls take their own lives.
The Children's Advocate talked to youth across the province to find out what they think can be done. APTN's Larissa Burnoff has the details.
Daniel Bird contemplated taking his life for 2 years following the death of his mother.
Moments of disparity, like I was going through a pit.
He was one of 256 Indigenous youth that spoke with the Children's Advocate Corio Soup when he conducted community visits over the last year to look deeper into suicide.
It's a huge issue for us in northern Saskatchewan, and it continues to be, and we know it's a huge issue, and it's a cry for help, and we have to do something.
Lac La Ronge Indian Band Chief Tammy Cook-Searson says she welcomes the report. 6 First Nations girls between 11 and 14 took their own lives in her community in October 2016.
This is a powerful report, and it's a voice of our Indigenous youth within our community saying these are the issues, this is what's going on in our lives. You know, here are some of the solutions that we have.
That report highlights some key issues like the impact of bullying, a lack of emotional support, mental health issues, and the impact of substance abuse in the communities.
Our youth are crying out for help. It's because we don't properly resource, we don't properly fund the things that the kids are talking about in the report. And they're not difficult things. And some of them don't even require money. You know, like, get to know your kids.
The youth also called on their communities, and OSOUP echoed those calls to government to provide safer environments and more activities for youth.
FSIN, our Métis Nation, our First Nations are already developing strategies and have developed strategies in the past. So I'm calling upon our governments to fully support and fully resource and fund and enter into partnership and relationship with those organizations.
The province says they are committed to accepting the report recommendations. Larissa Burnoff, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Public hearings in Thunder Bay for the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls have now wrapped up. And again, concerns were raised over police investigations and heartbreak over families broken by violence, alcohol, and residential schools. Willow Fiddler explains.
Lily Southwind had a gut feeling not to hand over pictures to police. Her mum Viola had been missing for 3 days when she reported it to provincial police in Sulikote.
I gave them reluctantly because we didn't have, they didn't have current, like a current picture of her to post, like to share in hopes of finding her. So I gave it to them. They said, I told them when I did give it to them, I said, I want these back. I want them back right away. And they said, yep, we'll give them back. We're just going to make copies. You can come and get them.
Southwind would get periodic updates from police about her mother's case, but they never returned her mother's photos, despite repeated trips to the detachment. She was told by police it's possible her mother's file ended up in the burn pile when the detachment moved into a new building.
And I just sat there and I was in shock. My first thought was, so when was it lost? How long has it been lost? All that time, when things could have been done, or people could have been interviewed again. All that time, it's gone. Like,
she was told the file that contained statements and interviews would have to be rebuilt with officer notes. The inquiry can access police files and documents related to cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, but it's not yet clear how many files or documents they will be able to attain.
We have lawyers that will prepare subpoena, I think we say in English, and making sure that Chief Commissioner will send and write those subpoena. In Quebec, it's another case. The lawyers can sign those subpoena. So we are requesting a document to the institutions. Some institution responded in favor of our demand.
Southwind said she wants to see a national task force on missing persons and something she calls a VIP protocol that would deploy immediate search efforts when someone is reported missing. VIP is also her mother's initials, Viola Isabella Panaches.
to me, it would be something in my mother's memory, in her honor.
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls will take a break over the holidays. So far, there have been 8 hearings in 6 months in cities from coast to coast. However, it has not been without controversy and criticism. APTN's Tina House asked families for their thoughts on how the inquiry is performing so far.
Lorelei Williams has been watching the live streams on APTN. Williams' aunt is missing, and her cousin's DNA was found at Robert Picton's farm. She was one of the family members who testified in Whitehorse last May.
There's a lot that needs to be done because there are so many families across this country who have to have their stories told.
Lorelei is concerned about some of the problems surrounding the inquiry. She rated the inquiry a 4 on a scale from 1 to 10. More than a dozen people have left the inquiry since it launched only a year ago.
Just seeing all the stuff in the media about people being fired, people resigning, people leaving. There's just too many leaving.
Gladys Raddick has also been watching the inquiry's progress. Her niece, Tamara Chipman, went missing in 2005. Raddick says the inquiry has helped families find comfort. Nearly 1,000 family members have testified so far.
There's been a lot of relief for those families to finally be able to share their stories, and I think that it's given them a little bit of hope that maybe we can come up with some good recommendations.
There will be more hearings held in 2018. Dates for those hearings have not yet been released. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
And the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls was our topic on today's In Focus. We discussed many challenges the inquiry has been dealing with, such as the number of staff who have left or been fired, the lack of aftercare for families testifying, and the anticipated extension on the Commission's mandate. Here's what our guests had to say. We do know that the Commission is going to be asking for an extension from the federal government to continue on longer than that. Kathleen, what can you tell us about that?
Well, I checked with Minister Bennett's office today, and they still have not received a formal request for an extension. Now, we know they want it, so perhaps they just haven't had time or it's in the works. The other thing we heard this week in Thunder Bay, which was new, is that we heard Commissioner Ailson say we'd like another 2 years. That we hadn't heard a time period. They had left it open, the extension. They haven't put a dollar figure either. Now, I know that we've interviewed the minister before, and she said she's open, certainly, to hearing from them on the reason for an extension, but she'd also like to see a detailed plan, which is what Hilda mentioned earlier. They don't want to just have an open-ended, here's more time and money.
I wonder if in the beginning, when they were talking about establishing this inquiry, did 2 years not seem like it was enough in the first place when coming up with its mandate, given the complexity of the issue and the places it had to go and the deliverables that needed to be done?
I felt that, you know, when it was announced that it was 2 years and the amount of money, I didn't feel that it was enough time or enough money, you know, to really address the, like, how complex the issue is. And you know, once families and survivors started participating and hearing about it, because we know as Indigenous people, once we like a few people participate, then more people, you know, will start joining and participating as well. So I right from the onset, I said I can't see them completing the national inquiry in 2 years.
Well, some big issues are winding their way through the House of Commons and the Senate ahead of the holidays. More on that coming up after the break.
We'll also continue our look at OI leasing, but first here's a look at Thursday's weather forecast. Rain and +5 in St. John's, sunny and 5 above in Halifax, snow and a high of 1 in Cartwright, -4 under the sun in Happy Valley Goose Bay, -8 in Chibougamau, -11 in Val-d'Or, 0 in Montreal. In southern Ontario, +1 in Windsor and Sarnia, 0 in Toronto and Peterborough, -11 in Sioux Lookout and Timmins, -9 in Thunder Bay, sunny but cool in northern Manitoba, -19 in Churchill, -10 in Barons River, -6 in Dauphin and Brandon. Over to Saskatchewan, -2 in Estevan, -3 in Regina, sunny and 0 in Saskatoon, +1 in Meadow Lake and Buffalo Narrows, -15 in Stony Rapids. Welcome back. It's been a long time coming, but a big change is in store for the Indian Act. Earlier this week, the federal government passed a bill known as S3. It means an end to sex-based discrimination and will put women under the act on equal footing with men when it comes to passing their status onto their children. The bill still needs royal assent to become law.
Private Members Bill C-262, tabled by NDP MP Romeo Saganash, is one step closer to becoming law. Its aim is to ensure that the laws of Canada are in harmony with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The bill has reached the debate stage in the House of Commons. According to Romeo Saganash, there's a lot at stake. If passed, the legislation would provide a legal framework for the future.
If ever again there is a First Nations Control of First Nations Education Act coming down the road, then these are the basic and minimum standards that the government has to respect. That's what a legal framework is. So that's just an example, and that's, I think, in our review of legislation and policies in this country, well, here are the minimum standards that we need to respect.
Another bill that's heading for debate in the House of Commons is Bill C-61. The Anishinaabe Nation Education Agreement will give 23 First Nations in Ontario control over education. According to Grand Chief Patrick Modaby, it's taken over 20 years to develop their own education system. He says it should be in place by April 1st.
The best parts, I think, of this whole system is that it's really truly community driven. We have representation from each First Nation, sits on the steering committee that will direct the board, the education authority. So that's important because right now under the present system we have very little representation on the non-First Nation school boards. This is totally our school board.
Yesterday, we brought you a few stories of people who have been targeted by the Canada Revenue Agency over unpaid income tax. Tonight, we explain how it all began and an update on what's happening. Here's Annette Francis.
This Edmonton-based lawyer has been working on the OI leasing file in one way or another for the past 20 years. James Fish says he's been doing it pro bono off and on because of the 4,000 victims of the Canada Revenue Agency, like Rachel Schilling, Tom Hawk, and Ramona Dunn.
I admire these people who asserted a native right that existed without any disagreement up to the 1992 policy changes that the Canada Revenue Agency took it away from them. They're fighting for something they believe is important, and and they're suffering because of it.
Fighting Revenue Canada takes a lot of work and time. 5 years ago, Fish applied for a remission order to grant relief from the taxes and penalties on behalf of the employees.
Since that time, we've had nothing but stalling from the government. They have made several explanations as to why they haven't processed the remission order. We answer their concerns, and then they raise another one. So essentially, it's stalled. Nothing is happening.
Fish says he doesn't understand why the OI leasing employees are being targeted.
There are guidelines that have been established by the Canada Revenue Agency that seem to exempt treaty band councils and band organizations. So you have this unusual situation where an employee of OI is working side by side with an employee from one of the bands in Thunder Bay. The employee doing the same work, and the employee from the band in Thunder Bay is tax exempt, and the OI employee is required to pay taxes. We don't understand how that can be.
According to Luba Irwin of OI Leasing, it's because of a deal that was used as a tactic to divide their support.
When we started fighting this issue in 1995, when CRA imposed the tax on, or said everybody else was taxable, they made a deal with AFN and National Native Women and the Native political organizations across the country. At that point, we were all supporting, just before all this happens, we were all supporting or fighting the tax changes. And when the deal went through, then we lost the support of those that got the exemption.
Chief Isidore Day agrees there hasn't been much fairness when it comes to how the OI leasing employees have been targeted, compared to the Assembly of First Nations, whose head office is located here on Reserve in Akwesasne and has tax exemption in place for its employees.
It's all based on agreements, and I can't get into that right now, but I can tell you that it is an unfair situation, and it's one that the CRA does need to respond to.
But the Indigenous leadership that stayed quiet for so long appears to be stepping up. Last year at the Special Chiefs Assembly, the Chiefs voted in support of Resolution Number 72, which calls for the Canada Revenue Agency to end the harassment of former OI employees.
Therefore, be it resolved that the Chiefs in Assembly call upon Canada and the Minister of National Revenue, in the spirit of reconciliation, to provide immediate direction to the relevant Canada Revenue Agency employees to end all collection procedures against current and former OI Native Leasing Incorporated employees.
Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day says there hasn't been a lot of movement yet.
We're doing work to help out where we can. There's a real complexity to this issue, and it's a complex way in how you address this is really been the challenge for our people as individuals. How do they navigate through such an experience? And it's been horrifying for those individuals, and I think we as First Nation leaders, I think we probably had to have done more, I believe, to avoid some of this, and that's what we're doing now.
Another example of a double standard that made headlines last month is a number of rich Canadians who are able to avoid paying taxes by using offshore accounts. Fish says his clients are low income and not able to buy their way out.
The millionaires have the ability to get expensive and sophisticated advice. They have a lot of influence with the government because of their position. The people that are involved in this tax dispute, typical average income is somewhere between $16,000 and $28,000 a year. They don't have that kind of political influence, so they're an easy target.
Chief Day says it's a reconciliation issue that needs to be addressed.
What we want our people to do is connect with their chiefs, make sure that they're in a position to be called upon to provide information. What we want to try to do is we want to try to help our people navigate through this, and we'll know more after our meeting with CRA. We have the minister who will be coming to the meeting to meet with us. We've gotten that far now, which is much more than what has been done in the past.
The Minister of National Revenue met with Ontario chiefs today, where many issues were discussed, including tax relief instead of remission and the portability of rights. APTN requested comment from Minister Laboute and the Canada Revenue Agency, but both requests were denied. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
December 6th is known as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. We'll take you to one of the gatherings after the break.
But first, here's a look at the rest of Thursday's weather forecast. Sunny and +5 in Fort McMurray, 4 above under the sun in Grand Prairie. A warm one across southern Alberta, 12 above in Calgary, +9 in Lethbridge. Similar temperatures on the west coast, sunny and 12 in Tofino, +9 in Victoria and Port Hardy, +9 in Sandspit, 10 in Prince Rupert, 11 in Fort St. John. A mild day in Yukon, +6 in Whitehorse. Temps on the plus side of the thermometer in parts of NWT, 6 in Trout Lake, 4 in Fort Simpson. Not so lucky to the north, -21 in Sax Harbor, -7 in Paulatuck. Downright chilly in Nunavut, -24 in Whale Cove, Baker Lake, and Chesterfield, -22 in Igloolik, sunny, and -23 for Resolute. Welcome back. It's been 28 years since 14 women were killed in Montreal after a gunman opened fire on a school campus. As a result, December 6th is known as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. Several gatherings took place across the country to honor those students and other women who have died as a result of gender-based violence. In Winnipeg, the University of Manitoba hosted a memorial where 14 candles were lit to commemorate the victims. One elder spoke about the need for healing in Indigenous as well as non-Indigenous communities.
It's still happening because there's not as much healing as it should be. Some place there where people can meditate and where they can pray.
And that is your APTN National News for this Wednesday. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca.
And if you missed today's live edition of In Focus, where we discussed the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, you can find the episode on our website or tune into APTN on Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for watching tonight. I'm Juanita Tautuni. Have a great evening.
I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you back here tomorrow.